What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Assassin updates because you know what, it's finally here. We've been anticipating, we've been preparing, we've been making all sorts of content for months just for the final announcement that just got released today. And I do have to admit, I'm a little bit late to the party, and that's kind of just because I'm actually really sick right now. I've been sick pretty much all week and I'm kind of recovering, but that's why my voice is going to sound a little bit nasally, I guess, throughout the video. Either way though, let's take a look at the Assassins, what you can expect, and as well as how they lined up with our predictions from the past. So starting off with Talon. So with Talon we predicted that he would get a new passive, he would gain a massive roaming tool, and that he would also gain cooldown resets on his blink somehow, or have some extra form of a blink. We also predicted that he would keep his W. We predicted that he would also keep his ultimate, but with some tweaks, and we predicted that he would get changes to stealth in accordance with the stealth changes. So let's take a look. So Talon's new passive is actually very simple. He did get a new passive, so that's the correct prediction right there. It's actually just a 3-hit passive that procs after landing some stuff. It's pretty simple, just a nice tool that allows him to stack damage on a target and finally attack them for an extra bleed. And now his Q, we get into a little bit more of the predictions. So this is going to be his extra kind of mobility tool almost, or like his new sort of like blink effect that he gets. It's just like a targeted free movement direction blink, which is something I sort of touched on. Like I thought, okay, maybe he might get a free movement tool, which is exactly what he got. So I'm pretty excited as to how my Talon predictions turned out. His W, of course, stayed exactly the same, just as we predicted, or pretty much exactly the same. Of course, it procs his passive, but yep, pretty much the same ability, just like you can expect, the standard rake of just the wave clear tool. Now his E is something that is just super insane. Look at him, he's jumping over walls. So essentially how it works is you can jump over pretty much any wall in the game, just like that, how you see in the video. And it just has a longer cooldown for each individual wall, and this is like his massive roaming tool that we kind of expected him to get. However, it's a little bit weird in terms of the category of mobility, so we expected him to gain like increased combat mobility, but that's not entirely true. So I do have to say that my prediction for his E wasn't entirely correct. As for his ultimate, it's pretty much the same ability, just with a couple additional tweaks to it. It's got like a nice little spin effect there, really awesome animations, but for the most part it's kind of just the same ability in general. So overall our Talon predictions are, you know, pretty accurate, I would say, for the most part, but his new abilities are freaking awesome. I mean, that ability that jumps over walls is just so sick. So let's move on to Rengar. So with Rengar we predicted that he would keep his passive, that his passive of jumping from bushes to attack, that is, and that his changes, and that he would also get changes, to his bone tooth necklace and to the ferocity system to grant him raw stats rather than actually giving him mechanics changes, so that it would just be a passive stat stick rather than be something that, you know, evolves his gameplay over the course of the actual game itself. And we also predicted that his Q would get an element of failure, so either making it a skill shot or doing something to make it so that the opponents could dodge it. We also predicted that he would get pretty serious changes to his W, potentially becoming a totally new ability, or just getting major changes in general. We also predicted that he would get little to no changes to his E, and we also finally predicted that he would get decent changes to his ultimate in accordance with the stealth rework, as well as to make it so that there is a little bit more counterplay for opponents. Now let's take a look at his new abilities and see what we got. So as far as his passives go, his first passive of Unseen Predator, the one where he jumps with the bush at a target, pretty much stayed exactly the same. He definitely still keeps that, but now he gets a bonus damage effect on it, I believe. He gets bonus movement speed is what he gets. And the bone tooth necklace now gives him permanent attack damage. So it did become a stat stick, so that's a 2 for 2 prediction right there so far. Doing well. For his Q, it's become kind of like a mini skill shot, something that's like really easy to land, but is also very, you know, powerful and just a very big radius. So it is kind of a skill shot, but the radius and the range, like it seems like it's a skill shot, but a skill shot that is very easy to hit. And so it does give his Q an element of failure like we predicted. And overall, it does seem like it's going to be a pretty interesting ability and maybe make Rengar a little bit more difficult to play or a little bit easier to outplay. Now here's where our predictions start to get a little bit wonky. And so for his W, as you can see from the video, he didn't actually get that many changes to his W. So this is going to be the first thing of the Assassin reworks that I can say that I predicted incorrectly. He does get a new cleanse effect on his empowered W though, so that it did receive some decent changes. Oh, I got some Katarina footage. I'll take a look at that later. Worry about that one in a sec. Sorry about that. So yes, I did predict his W incorrectly. I think that's fair to say, but it's awesome. It's going to get some new cleanse effects as far as just the duration in general, and overall should be a pretty cool ability. And for his Ebola strike, it's pretty much, as you could expect, the exact same ability, just like we predicted. So that's, at least we predicted that correctly. And the empowered version as well is just going to be the exact same thing with the root. Riot talked a lot about how they really liked the design of this ability before the rework, so this was a pretty easy prediction, I do have to say, the fact that that wasn't going to change. Now his ultimate is mostly similar for the, you know, for the most part it's kind of similar, but it does have a new mechanic in the sense that it only lets you see one opponent with it. And this is like the new mechanic of counterplay that the ability has. So it doesn't let you see all opponents anymore, and as a result it gives opponents the counterplay of being able to just like bunch up and group up and make it so that Rengar can't actually see the target he's trying to assassinate, which gives it counterplay in team fights especially, but also still makes it really decent in general. You know, he's still a very useful ability. It's definitely weaker for sure, and it is a nice way to implement counterplay, pretty much what we expected and predicted. And overall, I'm excited to see how the new Rengar is going to play out. Looks like he's got a lot more counterplay to him. You know, his Q's a skill shot now. His ultimate has something that you can actually do against it rather than just dying instantly, especially when Rengar's fed. So it does seem like Rengar might be a little bit weaker with those changes, because I'm not sure if the things he gained in compensation, like the cleanse on his W and the bonus movement speed on his passive, were enough to make up for that, but we'll have to wait and see. And we'll be playing every assassin and making videos about them as the week continues. Now, LeBlanc, we predicted that she would probably get a new passive. If she didn't get a new passive, it would definitely be major changes to it. We also predicted that the Q mark interactions would change. We also predicted that the W would have some of the mechanics on it changed, but it would still become the same ability, and it would lose a little bit of power and be put in other places. For his E, we predicted little, or for her E, sorry, we predicted little to no changes, and for her ultimate, we predicted fairly little to no changes apart from nerfs to fit her power budget. Now her passive has become the Q mark interaction, so that's a 2 for 2 right off the start, is that the Q mark interactions did change, and she did get a new passive. So now whenever you hit any ability on a target with LeBlanc's any of her abilities, you get the Q mark on her, which is actually pretty exciting. And the Q is kind of similar to like the Rise E almost, in the fact that it now actually bounces to targets that are marked. And so if you mark multiple targets, say by using your W, you can then use your Q, and that will pretty much clear all of them. So now you can use WQ as a form of wave clear, which is something that is actually really interesting. I'm not sure if I expected LeBlanc to get that. And oh, let's not skip her W. So her W is pretty much the same ability. It does have some a little bit of like weird mechanics changes. I believe I have to check the actual patch notes on that, but I'm gonna say that one was like pretty much a successful prediction. Her E, same ability, just like you could expect. We also predicted that it would get like a range indicator, so that's something that it's definitely getting. And as you can see in the video there, there is a range indicator similar to like Morgana's ultimate, so I'm happy about that, and I think that's going to be a great change. Now her ultimate is something that, again, similar to Rengar's W, I have to say I did not predict correctly because it became a pretty much new ability. It does have a lot of similarities to her old ultimate, but it is pretty much a new ability. So essentially what she does is she summons like this clone, and the clone will last for a very short period of time and cast any ability that LeBlanc also casts and then despawn. And so you can also use it to just spawn the clone, and the clone will kind of like fake out opponents and use abilities that don't actually deal damage. So it's a pretty complex change to her ultimate, but in general is something that I'm pretty excited to mess around with. The video is getting a bit long, so let's try to speed this up. So with Katarina, we predicted a new Q ability, a new W ability, but with the old W still existing somewhere on her kit. We also predicted that she would keep her passive, gain more mobility, but also lose the damage reduction effect on her Shunpo. And we also predicted that she would gain a slower time to kill, so she wouldn't be able to one-shot targets as fast, as quickly anymore. And we predicted that she would get a stronger laning phase, but become more vulnerable to ganks, as a result probably losing the ward hop. And lastly, we predicted little to no ultimate changes. So let's take a look. So her passive is, well, it's exactly the same actually. When she kills a target, she gets resets. That's pretty much what you can expect. And there's a bunch of abilities in this video that you don't understand because they're not her passive, but just know the passive is exactly the same. So the Q has changed a lot, just like we predicted, a completely new ability, pretty much. Might as well be. It's so different, at least. Even though it still has the same name, it's a really interesting version. Let's take a look at that one again. So what she does is she throws the bouncing blade, and it bounces to a couple targets, but then it spawns a blade. So that's like her new mechanic thing. And when she picks up a blade, she activates her old W. So that's the old W still existing somewhere in her kit. So the Q spawns a blade after it bounces, and it only bounces to 3 targets as well. And the W just spawns a blade right at her. She throws it up in the air, so spawns it after a short delay, but that's really all it does, is it just spawns another blade. But this is when things get really interesting, is when we take a look at her new E. So just like we predicted, she's getting more mobility, but essentially what happens is that if you Shunpo to a blade, it resets the cooldown. So you can Q, spawn a blade, Shunpo to it, use your W, Shunpo to your opponent, kill them, Shunpo back to your blade, and then Shunpo again. And you can do some crazy shenanigans with this Shunpo reset. It's super sick. I think that this mechanic is actually really cool. It's going to be super fun to play with for Katarina players. I can't vouch for how fun it's going to be to play against, but I'm definitely excited to mess around with it. Now, her ultimate is very simple. It's the exact same ability pretty much, just like we predicted. Little to no ultimate changes overall. So there you go. There's her ultimate, just like that. Pretty simple stuff. So as far as the remaining assassins go, we actually didn't make that many predictions in general for most of the champions. I mean, Zed, Akali, Kha'Zix, Shaco, and Echo are all receiving changes that are pretty straightforward and were pretty telegraphed as far as just the changes in general go. Fizz, we made a little bit of predictions, but turns out that he's getting a lot less changes than we expected. So Fizz's Sharks gets bigger depending on how far Chum the Water's traveled, and the video is getting a bit long, so I do want to speed run through these. And with Zed, upon killing an enemy champion with Deathmark, Zed permanently gains a portion of their attack damage for himself. So that's going to be pretty interesting to play with. He's going to get some permanent AD potentially and get some nice stats. So Akali also is going to blink a short distance, leaving a Twilight Shroud at her original location. So it's going to be a nice tool that she can use. Hopefully, she is getting a full-on rework later. So she's kind of just getting like some minor tweaks here, as kind of just like a band-aid fix. Kha'Zix evolutions, just like we predicted, are evolving. His Q, W, and R are going to be getting updates to be more suited for isolated takedowns. So there's going to be more meaningful decisions with his evolutions, just like we said. And Shaco is getting a nice new mechanic on his ultimate, which is actually pretty interesting, something that we didn't predict really. That Shaco's clone is going to drop 3 Jack-in-the-Boxes and cause enemies to flee when it dies. So that's going to be super interesting to take a look at and play around with. It's a very nice new mechanic that I think is going to be fun to play with. And Echo, his passive is no longer going to slow, which is definitely a nerf targeted at tank Echo. But Chrono Break is going to trigger parallel conversions as Echo travels back through time. So definitely going to be a bit of an interesting change. Definitely a nerf targeted at tank Echo. Overall, though, I'm pretty happy with how our predictions turned out. I think in general they were mostly like fairly accurate, and I was really excited and happy that I was able to take a look at the Assassin reworks before they were released, and I'm very happy now that they are finally released that I'm going to take a look at them again, really, as the week comes out, and, you know, as the week goes on, we'll take a look at them on the PBE. But if you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you want, and I'll see you guys in some more Assassin videos in the future.